Good evening and welcome back to a house full of stories. It's been a little bit of a gap since I've done this, and it being Halloween, I wanted to tell you this creepy little story called The Rose Garden by M.R. James. M.R. James is a recent discovery, and well, here we go. Happy Halloween. Thank you for joining me tonight. And this is The Rose Garden. Mr. and Mrs. Antruther were at breakfast in the parlour of Westfield Hall in the country of Essex. They were arranging plans for the day. George, said Mrs. Antruther, I think you had better take the car to Malden and see if you can get any of those knitted things I was speaking about, which would do for my stall at the bazaar. Oh, well, if you wish it, Mary, of course I can do that. But I had half arranged to play a round with Geoffrey Williamson this morning. The bazaar isn't till Thursday of next week, is it? What has that got to do with it, George? I should have thought you would have guessed that if I can't get the things I want in Malden, I shall have to write to all manner of shops in town, and they are certain to send something quite unsuitable in price or quality the first time. If you have actually made an appointment with Mr. Williamson, you had better keep it. But I must say, I think you might have let me know. Oh, no, it wasn't really an appointment. I quite see what you mean. I'll go. And what shall you do yourself? Why, when the work of the house is arranged for, I must see about laying out my new rose garden. By the way, before you start for Malden, I wish you would just take Collins to look at the place I fixed upon. You know it, of course. Well, I'm not quite sure that I do, Mary. Is it at the upper end towards the village? Good gracious, no, my dear George. I thought I had made that quite clear. No, it's a small clearing just off the shrubbery path that goes towards the church. Oh, yes, where we were saying there must have been a summer house once. The place with the old seat and the posts. But do you think there's enough sun there? My dear George, do allow me some common sense. And don't credit me with all your ideas about summer houses. Yes, there will be plenty of sun when we have got rid of those box bushes. I know what you're going to say, and I have as little wish as you to strip the place bare. All I want Collins to do is to clear away the old seats and the posts and things before I come out in an hour's time. And I hope you will manage to get off fairly soon. After luncheon, I think I shall go on with my sketch of the church. And if you please, you can go over to the links or... a good idea, Mary, very good. Yes, you finish that sketch, and I should be glad of a round. I was going to say, you might call on the bishop, but I suppose it's no use making any suggestion. And now, do be getting ready, or half the morning will be gone. Mr. Anstruther's face, which had shown symptoms of lengthening, shortened itself again, and he hurried from the room and was soon heard giving orders in the passage. Mrs. Anstruther, a stately dame of some 50 summers, proceeded, after a second consideration of the morning's letters, to her housekeeping. Within a few minutes, Mr. Anstruther had discovered Collins in the greenhouse, and they were on their way to the site of the projected rose garden. I do not know much about the conditions most suitable to these nurseries, but I am inclined to believe that Mrs. Anstruther, though in the habit of describing herself as a great gardener, had not been well advised in the selection of a spot for the purpose. It was a small, dank clearing, bounded on one side by a path and on the other by thick box bushes, laurels, and other evergreens. The ground was almost bare of grass and dark of aspect. Remains of rustic seats and an old and corrugated oak post somewhere near the middle of the clearing had given rise to Mr. Anthrusa's conjecture that a summer house had once stood there. Clearly, Collins had not been in possession of his mistress's intentions with regard to this plot of ground, and when he learnt them from Mr. Anthusa, he displayed no enthusiasm. "Of course, I would clear them seats away soon enough," he said. "They aren't no ornament to the place, Mr. Anthusa, and rotten too. Look here, sir." And he broke off a large piece, rotten right through. "Yes, clear them away. Be sure we can do that." "And the post," said Mr. Anthusa. "That's got to go too." Collins advanced and shook the post with both hands. Then he rubbed his chin. "That's firm in the ground, that post is," he said. "There's been a number of years, Mr. Anthusa. I doubt I shall get that up not quite so soon as what I can do with them seats." "But your mistress specifically wishes it to be got out of the way in an hour's time," said Mrs. Anthusa. Collins smiled and shook his head slowly. "You'll excuse me, sir, but you feel of it for yourself." "No, sir. No one can't do what's impossible to him, can they, sir? I could get that post up by after tea time, sir, but that'll want a lot of digging. What you require, you see, sir, if you'll excuse me naming of it, you'll want the soil loosening round the post here, and me and the boy, we shall take a little time doing that. But now, these are seats," said Collins, appearing to appropriate this portion of the scheme as due to his own resourcefulness. "Why, I can get the barrow around and have them cleared away in less than an hour's time from now, if you'll permit it." Only what, Collins?" "Well, now, it ain't for me to go against orders, no more than what it is for you yourself or anyone else." This was added somewhat hurriedly. "But, if you'll permit me, sir, this ain't the place I should have picked out for no rose garden myself. Why, look at them box and Lawrencestrins, how they regular protrude the light from—" Yes, but we've got to get rid of some of them, of course." "Oh, indeed, get rid of them. Yes, to be sure, but I beg your pardon, Mr. Anthusa." "I'm sorry, Collins, but I must be getting along now. I hear the car at the door. Your mistress will explain exactly what she wishes. I'll tell her then that you can see your way to clearing the seats at once and post this afternoon. Good morning." Collins was left rubbing his chin. Mrs. Anthusa received the report with some discontent, but did not insist upon any change of plan. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, she had dismissed her husband to his golf, had dealt faithfully with Collins and with the other duties of the day, and having sent a camp stool and umbrella to the proper spot, had just settled down to a sketch of the church as seen from the shrubbery, when a maid came hurrying down the path to report that Miss Wilkins had called. Miss Wilkins was one of the few remaining members of the family from whom the Anthusas had brought the Westfield estate some years back. She had been staying in the neighborhood, and this was probably a farewell visit. "Perhaps you could ask Miss Wilkins to join me here," said Mrs. Anthusa. And soon Miss Wilkins, a person of mature years, approached. "Yes, I'm leaving the Ashes tomorrow, and I shall be able to tell my brother how tremendously you've improved the place. Of course, he can't help regretting this old house just a little, as I do myself, but the garden is really delightful now." "I'm so glad to hear you say so, but you mustn't think we've finished our improvements. Let me show you where I mean to put a rose garden. It is quite close by here." The details of the project were laid before Miss Wilkins in some length, but her thoughts were evidently elsewhere. "Yes, delightful," she said rather absently. But do you know, Mrs. Anthusa, I'm afraid I was thinking of old times. I'm very glad to have seen this spot again just before you altered it. Frank and I had quite a romance about this place." "Yes, do tell me what it was. Something quaint and charming, I'm sure," said Mrs. Anthusa smilingly. Not so very charming, but it always seemed to me curious. Neither of us would be in here alone when we were children, and I'm not sure that I should care about it now in certain moods. It is one of those things that can hardly be put into words, by me at least, and that sounds rather foolish if they are not properly expressed. I can tell you after a fashion that it was that gave us, well, almost a horror of the place when we were alone. It was towards the evening of one very hot autumn day when Frank had disappeared mysteriously about the grounds and I was looking for him to fetch him to tea. And going down this path, I suddenly saw him, not hiding in the bushes as I rather expected, but sitting on the bench in the summer house. There was a woolen summer house here, up in the corner, asleep, but with such a dreadful look on his face that I really thought he might be ill, or even dead. I rushed at him and shook him and told him to wake up, and wake up he did with a scream. I assure you, the poor boy seemed almost beside himself with fright. He hurried me away to the house and was in a terrible state all that night, hardly sleeping. Someone had to sit up with him as far as I remember. He was better very soon, but for days I couldn't get him to say why he had been in such a condition. It came out at last that he had really been asleep and had had a very odd, disjointed sort of dream. He never saw much of what was around him, but he felt the scenes most vividly. First, he made out that he was standing in a large room with a large number of people in it, and that someone was opposite to him who was very powerful, and he was being asked questions which he felt to be very important. And whenever he answered them, someone, either the person opposite to him or someone else in the room, seemed to be, as he said, making up something against him. All the voices sounded to him to be very distant, but he remembered bits of the changes that were said. Where were you on the 19th of October? And is this your handwriting? And so on. I can see now, of course, that he was dreaming of some trial, but we were never allowed to see the papers, and it was odd that a boy of age should have a vivid idea of what went on in a court. All the time he felt he had the most intense anxiety and oppression and hopelessness, though I don't suppose he used such words as that to me. Then after that, there was an interval in which he remembered being dreadfully restless and miserable. Then there came some other sorts of picture, where he was aware that he had come out of doors on a dark raw morning with a little snow about. It was in a street, or at any rate among houses, and he felt that there were numbers and numbers of people there too, and that he was taken up by some creaking of wooden steps and stood on a sort of platform. But the only thing he could actually see was a small fire burning somewhere near him. Someone who had been holding his arm left hold of it and went towards this fire. And then he said the fright he was in was worse than at any part of his dream. And if I had not wakened him, he didn't know what would have become of him. A curious dream for a child to have, wasn't it? Well, so much for that. It must have been later in the year that Frank and I were here, and I was sitting in the arbor just about sunset. I noticed the sun going down and told Frank to run in and see if tea was ready while I finished a chapter of the book I was reading. Frank was away longer than I expected, and the light was going so fast that I had to bend over my book to make it out. All at once, I became conscious that someone was whispering to me inside the arbor. The only words I could distinguish, or thought I could, were something like, pull, pull, I'll push, you pull. Started up in something of a fright. The voice, it was little more than a whisper, sounded so hoarse and angry, as if it came from a long, long way off, just as it had done in Frank's dream. But though I was startled, I had enough courage to look around and try to make out where the sound came from. And this sounds very foolish, I know, but still it is the fact. I made sure it was strongest when I put my ear to an old post which was part of the rear end of the seat. I was so certain of this that I remember making some marks on the post as deep as I could with the scissors out of my work basket. I don't know why. I wonder, by the way, whether That isn't the very post itself. Yes, it might be. There are marks and scratches on it, but one can't be sure. Anyhow, it was just like that post you have there. My father got to know that both of us had had a fright in the arbor, and he went down there himself one evening after dinner, and the arbor was pulled down at very short notice. I recollect hearing my father talking about it to an old man who used to do odd jobs round the place, and the old man saying, "Don't you fear for that, sir. He's fast enough in there without no one to take and get him out." But when I asked who it was, I could get no satisfactory answer. Possibly my father or mother might have told me more about it when I grew up, but as you know, they both died when we were still quite children. I must say it has always seemed very odd of me, and I've often asked the older people in the village whether they knew of anything strange, but either they knew nothing or they wouldn't tell me. Dear, dear, how I have been boring you with my childhood remembrances, but indeed that arbor did absorb our thoughts quite remarkably for a time. You can fancy, can't you, the kind of stories we made up for ourselves? Well, dear Mr. Anthruser, I must be leaving you now. We shall meet in town this winter, I hope, shan't we? The season posts were cleared away and uprooted respectively by that evening. Late summer weather is proverbially treacherous, and during dinner time, Mrs. Collins had set up to ask for a little brandy, because her husband had taken a nasty chill, and she was afraid he would not be able to do much the next day. Mrs. Anthruser's morning reflections were not wholly placid. She had She was sure some roughs had got into the plantations during the night. Another thing, George. The moment that Collins is about again, we must tell him to do something about the owls. I never heard anything like them, and a positive one came and perched somewhere just outside our window. If it had come in, I should have been out of my wits. It must be a very large bird from its voice. Didn't you hear it? No, of course not. You were sound asleep as usual. Still, I must say, George, you don't look as if your night had done you much good. My dear, I feel as if another of the same would turn me silly. You have no idea of the dreams I had. I couldn't speak of them when I woke up, and if this room wasn't so bright and sunny, I shouldn't care to think of them even now. Well, really, George, that isn't very common with you, I must say. You must have. No, you only had what I had yesterday. Unless you had tea at that wretched clubhouse. Did you? No, no, nothing but a cup of tea and some bread and butter. I should really like to know how I came to put my dream together, as I suppose one does put one's dreams together, from a lot of little things one has been seeing or reading. Look here, Mary. It was like this, if I shan't be boring you. I wish to hear what it was, George. I will tell you when I've had enough. All right, I must tell you that it wasn't like other nightmares in one way, because I didn't see anyone who spoke to me or touched me, and yet I was most fearfully impressed with the reality of it all. First, I was moving about, in an old-fashioned sort of panelled room. I remember there was a fireplace and a lot of burnt papers in it, and I was in a great state of anxiety about something. There was someone else, a servant, I suppose, because I remember saying to him, "Horses, as quick as you can," and then waiting a bit. Next, I heard several people coming upstairs, and a noise like spurs on a broaded board, and then the door opened, and whatever it was that I was expecting happened. Yes, but what was that? You see, I couldn't tell. It was the sort of shock that upsets you in a dream. You either wake up or else everything goes black. That's what happened to me. Then I was in a big, dark walled room, panelled, I think, and the others, and a number of people, and I was evidently standing your trial, I suppose, George? Goodness, yes. Maybe I was. But did you dream that too? How very odd. No, no, I didn't get enough sleep for that. Go on, George, and I will tell you afterwards. Yes, well, I was being tried for my life. I have no doubt from the state I was in. I had no one speaking for me, and somehow there was a most fearful fellow. On the bench, I should have said. Only that he seemed to be pitching into me most unfairly and twisting everything I said and making most abominable questions. What about? Why, dates when I was at particular places, and letters I was supposed to have written, and why I had destroyed some papers. And I recollect his laughing at answers I made in a way that quite daunted me. It doesn't sound much, but I can tell you, Mary, it was really appalling at the time. I'm quite certain there was such a man once, and a most horrible villain he must have been. The things he said. Thank you, I have no wish to hear them. I can go to the links any day myself. How did it end? Oh, against me. He saw to that. I do wish, Mary, I could give you a notion of the strain that came after that, and seemed to me to last for days, waiting and waiting, and sometimes writing things I knew to be enormously important to me, and waiting for answers, and none coming, and after that I came out. Huh? What makes you say that? Do you know what sort of thing I saw? Was it a dark, cold day and snow in the streets and a fire burning somewhere near you? By George, it was! You have had the same nightmare. Really not? Well, it is the oddest thing. Yes, I've no doubt it was an execution for high treason. I know I was laid on straw and jolted along most wretchedly, and then had to go up some steps, and someone was holding my arm, and I remember seeing a bit of ladder and hearing a sound of a lot of people. I really don't think I could hear now go into a crowd of people and hear the noise they were making. However, mercifully, I didn't get to the real business. The dream passed off with a sort of thunder inside my head. But Mary, I know what you're going to ask. I suppose there's an instance of a kind of thought reading. Miss Wilkins called yesterday and told me of a dream her brother had had as a child when they lived here. And something did no doubt make me think of that when I was afraid last night, listening to those horrible owls and those men talking and laughing in the shrubbery. By the way, I wish you would see if they've done any damage and speak to the police about it. And so, I suppose, from my brain it must have gotten to yours while you were asleep. Curious, no doubt. I'm so sorry it gave you such a bad night. You'd better be in the fresh air as much as you can today. Oh, it's all right now, but I think I will go over to the lodge and see if I can get a game with any of them. And you? I have enough to do for this morning and this afternoon if I'm not interrupted. There is my drawing. To be sure, I want to see that finished very much. No damage was discoverable in the shrubbery. Mr. Antruther surveyed with faint interest the site of the road garden, where the uprooted posts still lay, and the hole it had occupied remained unfilled. Collins, upon inquiry made, proved to be better, but quite unable to come to his work. He expressed by the mouth of his wife a hope that he had done nothing wrong clearing away them things. Mrs. Collins added that there was a lot of talking people in Westfield, and the old ones was the worst, seemed to think that everything of them having been in the parish longer than what other people had. But as to what they said, no more could be then ascertained than it had quite upset Collins and was a lot of nonsense. Recruited by lunch and a brief period of slumber, Mrs. Antruther settled herself comfortably upon a sketching chair in the path leading through to the shrubbery to the side gate of the churchyard. Trees and buildings were among her favourite subjects, and here she had good studies of both. She worked hard, and the drawing was becoming a really pleasant thing to look upon by the time the wooded hills to the west had shut off the sun. Still, she would have persevered, but the light changed rapidly and it became obvious that the last touches must be added on the morrow. She rose and turned towards the house, pausing for a time to take delight in the limpid green western sky. Then she passed on behind the dark box bushes, and at a point just before the path debouched onto the lawn, she stopped once again and considered the quiet evening landscape, and made a mental note that she must be the tower of one of the soothing churches that one caught on the skyline. Then a bird, perhaps, rushed in the box bush on her left, and she turned and stared at seeing what at first she took to be a 5th of November mask peeping out among the branches. She looked closer. It was not a mask. It was a face, large, smooth, and pink. She remembers the minute drops of perspiration which were starting from its forehead. She remembers how the jaws were clean-shaven and the eyes shut. She remembers also, and with an accuracy that makes the thought intolerable to her, how the mouth was open and a single tooth appeared below the upper lip. As she looked, the face receded into the darkness of the bush, The shelter of the house was gained, and the door was shut before she collapsed. Mr. and Mrs. Antruther had been for a week or more recruiting at Brighton before they received a circular from the Essex Archaeological Society and a query as to whether they possessed certain historical portraits of which it was decided to introduce in the forthcoming work on Essex portraits to be published under the Society's auspices. There was an accompanying letter from the secretary which contained the following passage. We are especially anxious to know whether you possess the original engraving of which I enclose a photograph. It represents Sir Lord Chief Justice under Charles II, who, as you doubtless know, retired after his disgrace to Westfield and is supposed to have died there of remorse. It may interest you to know that a curious entry has recently been found in the registers, not of Westfield, but of Prior's Roothing, to the effect that the parish was much troubled after his death, and that the rector of Westfield summoned the parsons of all the Roothings to come and lay him, which they did. The entry ends by saying, the stake is in a field adjoining to the churchyard of Westfield, on the west side. Perhaps you can let us know if any tradition to this effect is current in your parish. The incidents with which the enclosed photograph recalled were productive of a severe shock to Miss Antruther. It was decided she must spend that winter abroad. Mr. Antruther, when he went down to Westfield to make necessary arrangements, not unnaturally told this story to the rector, who showed little surprise. Really, I had managed to piece it out for myself very much what must have happened, partly from old people's talk, and partly from what I saw in your grounds. Of course, we have suffered to some extent also. Yes, it was bad at first, like owls as you say, and men talking sometimes. One night it was in this garden, and other times about several of the cottages. But lately there has been very little, and I think it will die out. There is nothing in our registers except the entry of the burial, and what I for a long time took to be the family motto. But the last time I looked at it, I noticed it was added in a later hand, and had the initials of one of our rectors, quite late in the 17th century. A.C. Augustine Crompton. Here it is, as you see, Quieta non movere, I suppose. Well, it is rather hard to say what, I do suppose. The story ends here. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will be bringing back more stories to you in the days and weeks to come. Happy Halloween once again.